Already started. My name is Peter Mellish. I'm the Executive Director of the PEI ATV Federation. And tonight I have a crew, Wayne Dobbs here from the Canadian Quad Council in Ontario. And between Wayne and myself, we're gonna take care of the commentary and the speaking and responding to questions and that kind of thing. With us is Jennifer Gallant, our President, our Vice President Ryan, Tracy Hickman, our Secretary, she's taking notes, and Kelly Dowling, what are you again? Communications Specialist. So she's going to be videotaping this tonight so that we can watch it on YouTube later, and the people that can't attend can view it online. And if the camera's only fixed on me, imagine that. So. First thing I'd like to do is thank Centennial Auto Group. They've sponsored these town halls. We've had a town hall on Tuesday night in Cornwall, and we had one in Emerald last night, and this is the last one. So they've graciously helped us with paying for the locations and being part of this. So yeah, I'd like to thank them. The other thing I'd like to do is ask anybody in this room that has volunteered at any club level to please stand up. Anybody that volunteered at the club or the federation? So first of all, I'd like to say thank you. And without your volunteer power, we would never get to where we are today. So hats off to you. It's a thankless job. So. So first we're going to do is talk a little bit about the successes. I've been here since 2015. I put my hand up at a meeting one time and I don't think I realized what I was in for. So one of the projects we're working on is the potted dirt roads. 2 years ago we were successful in getting the Trails Act changed so that we could legally have crossings of the Confederation Trail. It took us almost, I think, 3 years to do it. There's 13 of them. There was a lot of opposition to it. That's one of the successes we've had. There was Confederation Trail crossings. We have 13 of those. That was the one that changed the Trail Act, sorry. Potted roads. We had 13 potted roads approved 2 years ago. Most of them were in the central part of PEI. They've gone off without any hiccups. And Evangeline this year is applying for 17 roads. There's 50 roads total that we're applying for now this year. And Evangeline has applied for 17, and those are just about approved. And that will, when we approve all 50 of them, it's going to add about 120 kilometers of trail connectivity to the clubs that exist. And the next round, Tignish's trail, or Tignish's potted roads, will be the ones submitted. I think it's going to happen with Tignish's and Eastern Kings. So we want to get summer trails established here, and the next ask, and a lot of the mapping's already done. We've worked together with the club to come up with the routes. Ultimately, is to try to get into Tignish. One of the other things is we have a part-time staff member at the Federation now, which is a huge help. And one of her main objectives is going to be to work with the clubs, help the clubs try to find grants, help the clubs with anything they need help with, to be a resource. It's great to cut trails, but it's kind of boring to have to do all that paperwork and governance stuff. So we want to help. We want to be a resource so the clubs can accomplish these things. One of the other projects we're working on is an ATV tourism feasibility study. We started that in November. It's about an 8-month study. Some of the people here have had conversations with the consultant. And the ultimate goal is to link all the clubs on PEI together as a tourism product. And in order for us to get the real money out there from ACOA and some of the other partners, we need to develop a tourism product. And that's the key to it, is to do this study, and this study is going to have a 3-year action plan after that. So we're going to actually have a roadmap on how to accomplish that. So they're reaching out. It's kind of a community-based approach. They're reaching out to other trail groups. They're reaching out to the clubs that we have. They're reaching out to businesses that are benefiting from ATVs now, and they're compiling their report, and hopefully it will give us more traction with the government to do some of the things that we need to do. In 2024, when you're trying to develop tourism, you always want to be part of what they call strategies. And it means basically that you're being consulted as a potential tourism product. And in 2024, ATV tourism has been identified as the #1 winter outdoor activity. So there is some traction happening in the tourism department. Last week, they've actually made one-page website for ATV tourism. They've never done that before. So there's some potential for us in the province to be able to feature the trails that are here if Mother Nature would work with us in the winter of next year. I'm trying to think, there's some other projects, but they may come to.
Share the road.
Oh, the other ones are Share the Road. Here we are in Tignish. So we've got 4 communities in PEI that have asked us to help them establish road access to access communities such as Tignish. So we made a presentation to Tignish Council. We made it to Murray Harbor. We made it to Abrams Village, and we made a presentation to Wellington. Abrams Village and the Village of Tignish have written letters to the Transportation Department requesting that the Off-Highway Vehicle Act be amended to allow this to happen. In New Brunswick, there's 28 communities that allow this to happen right now. And there has not been an incident in these 28 communities, and there's more communities asking for it all the time. So we're trying to take the best practices from New Brunswick, showing that it works, and doing it here. We met with the government, I think October 16th, and they would like us to work with the Police Association and the Federation of Municipalities to get their approval to do that. In the meantime, Kensington has decided to step it up. They're actually going to have public consultation and community meetings in March, I think March 9th, to test the community to see whether there's the interest there. They've already picked the route. All the businesses are in favor, so the club's in the process of getting the landowners' agreements signed off in that community for that to happen. So that's one of the projects that I think has a lot of potential for this community. And if we can get your pilot roads approved, then we get to the rink, then we can get from the rink to the gas station and accommodations and that kind of thing. So those are the main projects that we've done. The feasibility study that we're doing has been funded by the provincial government and ourselves. So we got a grant for $63,000 to do the study, and we have to contribute $8,500. So, and the reason why I'm mentioning that is because the provincial government is working with us. They're helping us. And the thing that they did before that is they helped us develop an environmental code of practice. And that's one of those pieces that gives us a lot of credibility out there in the community, so we can ask, and that's one of the things that's been opening a lot of doors for us. And again, the government helped fund that study. So these are some of the pieces that we put in place so that we can gain credibility, so when we ask for something, it's taken serious. And I've been here since 2015, and I had a meeting with Paula Bigger, and I think it was 2018, July 31st, 2018, and she was the transportation minister, and our committee met with her, and we said, Paula, we'd like to have some pilot roads, dirt roads, no homes on them, where we can link our clubs and develop trails, because you just can't always get the landowner signed off. And she said, well, that's never going to happen. So lo and behold, since 2018, we've accomplished, even when the politicians tell us it's not going to happen. And the reason why it's happening is the voice that we have. When we started in 2015, we had 3 clubs. We sold 300 trail passes. Last year, we had 9 clubs. One of the clubs isn't active right now, but we sold 2,600 trail passes, permits. So every time we have a new club come on board, which helps establish the trails in that area, but the real ammunition is the voice, a collective voice together. So, we need more clubs, but your voice is finally being listened in Charlottetown, and that's part of my job every day, is to try to take the things from the clubs that we want to see happen. But so we've gained a lot of traction in the last few years. So we're here tonight to talk about annual registration, but we're going to go over some of these numbers first. And the biggest number is last year the clubs it generated $92,000 in revenue to put back into their clubs for trail development, club improvements, whatever the club saw fit. And a lot of times that money was matched with the provincial government through rural development on the projects that the clubs had taken part of. And I think this club had put in heat pumps and a sewer system maybe, and done all kinds of things. So that's the number we generated last year in revenue for the trail permits on PEI. So this is the part that we're here to talk about tonight, and I kind of want to do a little bit of consensus in the room before I do it. I want everybody in this room has invested $10,000 or more in ATVing to put up their hand. Everybody has invested over $20,000 in this sport, can you put up your hand? Anybody's invested over $30,000? So tonight we're talking about the number on the first row. We're talking $50 a year. You've invested a lot more than $50, and I think the $50 that we're looking to leverage is going to give you the best bang that you can for the $50. So the proposal is for us to have annual registration, and this model is very similar. It's the same model as New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia has a model, but it's a little different. This model, the government will collect the revenue at access PEIs. It'll become an annual thing on your birthday. You have the same annual registration on your birthday, the same as it for your vehicles. The government will retain 20% of it, and that 20% is basically to cover off the cost of the plate and the cost for the government to do this initiative. 80% of it will be returned to the sport. The Federation will administrate the money from this, and possibly could keep up to 15% of the money for overhead, for staff, that kind of thing. But the majority of the money is going back to the clubs. So the rest of the money is divided against the clubs. I'm going to move back because I'm getting feedback all the time here. Okay, go to the next slide. So just a few dates around annual registration. We started this discussion in April of 2021 at a board meeting, and the board of the Federation, which represents the clubs across PEI, unanimously voted to write a letter to the government and say, is there a possibility that we could look at this funding model? And it took us a few months to develop the letter. On June 21st, we sent it off to the government. In May 5th of last year, because COVID happened and things just didn't move very fast, we met with the government on the first meeting, and it went very successful in that meeting. Last fall, we had a more advanced meeting with them. We talked about the nuts and bolts of it, how it would work, and then in the meantime, from the May 5th meeting to the October, they had done some research. They developed the regulations, and it's very similar to New Brunswick, but it's not a done deal. That's why we're here tonight. We're here to talk about the nuts and bolts of it, to see if there may be some tweaking or not tweaking or whatever. So when we met with the government, the biggest thing they said to us, and there was politicians in the room at the time, said, well, we think this is a great idea. We do it with the Wildlife Fund now, where when you pay the extra money for your plate, it goes to the watershed groups, the Ducks Unlimited, and whoever else applies for it. They said, we're good with it, but we can't own it. We need you to own it. We don't want the public to think that we're creating another tax. And I understand that. So the whole idea is we're having these public meetings to share the information. At the end of the day, we've got to own it. So that means the clubs will eventually vote on this, or the Federation board will eventually vote on this, but we have to own it. And in order for it to be successful, we own it. If we don't own it, it's not, if they get a hint that we're not united in this, it's not gonna go anywhere, and we're gonna lose a lot of credibility. So in October, we had a meeting between the Federation and our clubs. And Wayne came down from Ontario, and we had a presentation from Quad NB. 3 of their executive came over, and they basically explained to us how, you know, the pros, the cons, the challenges that they've had with theirs, and what would they recommend if they were in the shoes that we're in? What would you do? What would you change if you changed anything? So the model basically stayed the same. So we had workshops, and we shared the information that's in front of you tonight. And out of that meeting, we said, well, we need to have town hall meetings. We need to go out to our permit holders. We need to share the information. We need feedback. We just need to create some good discussion on this before we enter into any kind of agreement. So these are some of the numbers to kind of showcase the potential that this investment fund has for our sport. So in PEI, we have no way to know how many bikes are registered. The records that we have, they'll tell us how many were registered each year, but there's no way to know because there's no annual registration. So we're guesstimating there's 12,000 ATVs on PEI. So we're saying if this is implemented, we're gonna be able to attract 4,000 people to pay their annual registration. The government's portion to administrate this would be $40,000. The private sector will get $160,000, which is for the federation and the clubs. 15%, up to 15% can stay with the federation if it need be, and it would be used for overhead and wages and that kind of thing. The formula would be that it's a 30-30-40 split. So 30% of the money would be dispersed amongst the clubs. So if there's 9 clubs, 30% of the $136,000 would be $4,534 per club. Then the next part of the formula is the membership, and that's the members that actually sign club 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 9 on your trail permit. So, you know, if there's 2,100 trail permits sold next year, that would be $19.18 per member. And the last part is the kilometers, and this is important because it costs a lot of money to maintain trails, and the more trails you have, the more money you need based on trails. So the formula works out, it's $188 per kilometer. Next one. So this is an example of a club that has 400 members. It has 80 kilometers of trails. They would receive a grant for $20,910 annually. This is besides the trail permits that the clubs sell now. So if they were selling 400 permits at that club, they receive $35 a permit. So this money would go directly to the clubs, and the clubs can then take that money and leverage it with the funding partners that we have. So rural development right now will fund all of our projects for trail development at 50 cents on the dollar. So if you had no money revenue from your trail permits, you can actually turn that into $42,000 overnight. And it's a funding model. It's a real number. So that's how we came to that number based on the 400 members and the 80 kilometers of trails. So some of the benefits are funding without fundraising. And we say that lightly because I don't think there's ever going to be a time when you don't fundraise, because as the clubs grow, as the clubs have future plans, but this would certainly take the pressure off of fundraising. It's an annual guaranteed income, so it's a little easier on your volunteers. It's a little easier on wondering how you're going to do things the next year if you continue to have the same amount of members and people register the same amount of bikes. The other thing that's kind of really important is that we have more buy-in from the government decisions that affect us. So, you know, we have the potential to be consulted and part of a lot of decisions that happen that we haven't been part of in the past. So, you know, when they're working on projects, building new highways, when they're doing things, then we will be part of it because we actually have money to invest in those projects. So it changes the way we're perceived. You know, we're a stakeholder with a revenue source. The other trail groups on PEI aren't stakeholders of the revenue source. So our destiny will change, believe it or not. And that's the relationship in New Brunswick. And I'll get into that a little bit in the next couple of slides. Increased ability to apply for matching grant dollars. We haven't actually tapped into all the grant possibilities that are out there. Because we're a small province, we don't have a whole lot of luck with ACOA, and it's a tourism-based funding agency. So that's why I say in the past, tourism is a big part. There's a lot of potential for us to develop a product. I think PEI is, ATVing on PEI is the most underdeveloped tourism product there is, plain and simple. And motorized trails generate more revenue than any other trail group, and I would have to say combined on PEI. So there's a lot of potential for us to bring tourists here. We have reciprocal agreements with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and I think a lot of the people will leave here and take advantage of it. But we'd like to turn that around so that people will actually come across the bridge on Saturday morning instead of heading that way. But we need to further develop our product to attract people here. I think what we have here is an amazing product, and I think there's a lot of potential. When people say, well, it's a lot more fun to ride in the mainland, I think the people who come here from the mainland and they would see things and do things that we just take for granted. Increased ability to support new clubs and trail maintenance. So we have 9 clubs right now. We have 1 club inactive, and it's always a challenge when you're trying to do things as a volunteer. As I said earlier, our lady in the office is going to spend time with the clubs, support the clubs, help the clubs, because basically the federation is the clubs. You know, the people that sit on the board come from the clubs. The reps come from the clubs, so basically we're an extension of the clubs. So if the clubs are strong, then we're even stronger. If the clubs are having struggles or challenges, then we're having struggles and challenges. So it's like the big brother, little brother thing. So the hardest one to talk about is greater compliance. And you know, I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to have a trail that people will leave them alone. And there's not a trail outside of the door anywhere here, but that's where we'd like to get. We'd like to get to a point where, you know, people are compliant, they're on a legal trail, you leave them alone. But without trails, people drive everywhere, and so be it. I understand that, but anywhere we've had clubs that have expanded trails and became legal, that pressure from the enforcement officers has gone away because they're not doing anything illegal. And this community is a prime example that we'd love to see some legal trails here so that people want to do it legally, then they have that option. If they want to drive down the road like they have for 25 years, well, that's fair ball too. So some of the concerns that we've heard over the last 2 meetings is the timing right for this or not? And that's a tough question because, as I say, when you look across the bridge, you say, well, look what New Brunswick has and Nova Scotia has and Newfoundland has. But 25 years ago, when they were starting to develop kind of where we are today, they didn't have that. So at some point in time, we have to say, okay, there's a vision here. Let's invest in the future. So in 20 years time or 10 years time or 5 years time, we are in that position where the people from the mainland say, hey, you guys got an amazing thing going over there. Oh, really? Do we? Well, I think you have to have a vision, and you have to believe where we're going with this, and know that in the future we're going to have a product that can stand next to anybody else's in Atlantic Canada. It's a bit of the chicken and the egg. How do we obtain enough without annual registration? You know, I think when you want to build a house, you don't go and build your house first and then go to the credit union and say, can I get some money to pay for my house? You kind of do it the other way. You develop a funding model, you go to the bank, you get a mortgage, you get the permission, then you build your house. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is use this money to invest in the future. And it takes money. And again, I talked about this earlier a little bit. If we do this, we must own it. And tonight's the night to have the discussion. Tonight's the night to talk about the things, how you feel about this, so that we can work together with our clubs when we have a vote in a couple of weeks that reflects the wishes of the membership. So it's really important if you have an idea or can come up with another solution or another way to make this happen, we want to hear about it. So a little bit about the Quad MB model. We've been working really close with them and learning from what they've done. And some of the numbers that they have are, there's 52,000 bikes annually registered in New Brunswick, and approximately 10,000 of those bikes don't get registered for whatever reason. And the same thing is going to happen here. There's people that don't register and they don't want to, and that's fair of all. But we're asking for the majority of the people to contribute to the sport. It'll be the law that you have to, but in the world, you know, it's not a perfect world. And as you can see, they only sell 31,000 trail passes, so what's that, 60%? Something like that. And that is the best ratio to register bikes to trail permit sales, I think, in Canada. So they're very successful. In Nova Scotia, I'm going to say there's at least 30,000 ATVs, but I think they only sell 6,000 trail passes a year, and I'm not sure how many are registered, but they have worked very hard in New Brunswick to develop the product, and they brought those numbers up over the years. As the product developed, more people became registered their vehicles, bought their permit stickers, and were on legal trails. So in New Brunswick, it wasn't as hard to sell to do this. When they originally had annual registration at that time, it was $16 a year. And now it's $42 with that formula. When we had our meetings with them in October, they kind of said, you know, we wish we were at the 50. They said, we wish we had the same kind of deal that you guys are trying to put together, because when they did their deal, there was no inflation built into it. So their deal was, and I don't know how long it's been going on in New Brunswick.
15 years.
15 years. So everybody knows in 15 years, costs have gone up. I guess the last 3 years, costs have gone up. So they would love to be in a position where they have the potential, the same deal that we have. On PEI right now, snowmobiles are annually registered, but they do not have a formula. They have an agreement with the province for some of that money to come back to the Snowmobile Association, but it's not anywhere near the deal that we're proposing. So I think their deal is $50,000 a year max goes back to the Snowmobile Association. So if you did the math, I think there's 3,800 snowmobiles registered a year on PEI at $50 a year. Let's just say it's $150,000. 2/3 of it's going back to the province, and 1/3 of it's going to the Snowmobile Association. In New Brunswick, they have a deal with the Snowmobile Association and the ATV Federation. They're both at the same renewal rate, and they have two funds. And the more permits, the more registrations happen, the more money's in the pot. The PEI Snowmobile Association, it's capped at $50,000. New Brunswick Quad MB has 5 employees. They have a budget of $2 million a year. I'm not sure how many kilometers of trails they have. And they have a fantastic relationship with the government. So I was very fortunate to attend their AGM this year, or last year in March. And the Minister of Community Cultures was there, and he quietly talked in the meeting about a grant in excess of $1.5 million for trail development with bridges. And if anybody follows Quad MB, they'll see there's some pretty amazing bridges being built. They have a 1,600 kilometer loop in the province, and they're very, very close to having that as a complete legal route. So that will be a game changer for them. But they've been able to take the money from their infrastructure fund and leverage it with the province. And the province, Quad MB has been getting a phenomenal support through tourism. As I said, there's 28 communities that have access to the roads for services. You want to go to the movie in Bathurst or get your groceries, you can drive with your side-by-side or your ATV to do that. So, so they've been able to partner with New Brunswick government. They just finished, I think, 5 trailheads, and the trailheads were built at no cost to Quad NB, but they're a collaboration between the non-motorized trails and the motorized, and they have washrooms and solar lighting and gravel parking lots, and one end of the parking lot is the ATV trail, and the other end of the parking lot is the actual hiker and bikers. So they're starting to realize, let's build one trailhead in a common area instead of building one for the hikers and one for the bikers and whatever other trail groups there is. So there's a lot of things happening in New Brunswick. They have some really big news coming out in the next couple of weeks with some of the projects that they're working on. Next one. So the next steps for this annual registration is we had the first 2 town hall meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday, and today's the 3rd one here, total of 3. The Federation Board's going to meet for our monthly meeting on February 8th, and we're going to finalize on how we're going to proceed with this with a vote. And the vote will happen with the full board as if we're having an annual general meeting or a regular meeting, and it will be the 2 proxies and the club representatives. So the clubs will go back now to their executives and their permit holders and talk about how they feel they should vote for this annual registration. And when we're done voting, we already talked about owning it, and and I have to say that because if we don't own this, it could fall apart, and it's crucial to the future of our sport, and we will again lose a lot of credibility if we don't agree that the vote is the vote and we move on from it. So if it happens, then we're going to develop a communications plan, and we are going to share it. We are going to ensure that there's time to do what we need to do. Everybody will know exactly what's going on, and it'll be liaison through the clubs and our social media and that kind of thing. So one of the other things that we've accomplished a couple of years ago is an environmental code practice. And when you talk about the environment, there's all kinds of buzzwords, and people automatically think, people that grab onto trees, and as you can tell, I'm not a grab onto a tree guy. We want to explain to you sustainable trails. So this picture identifies that the trail on the left is not very sustainable, especially tonight. And the idea is we can't ask 200 tourists to come from New Brunswick and drive that trail, because when they're done of it, it'll even look worse than it is. So this section of trail was hardened with potato rock and field rock, and it is the exact same spot. So this trail is now a sustainable trail on the right. So it'll be able to stay open longer. It'll be able to withstand more traffic. Our soil composition on PEI is great for growing potatoes. And it's not very good for building ATV trails. So most of the time, the farmers and the landowners that have land available to us, they farm every inch of that they possibly can. And then we're left a buffer, or we're left the end of the field that's wet every 2 or 3 years. It's not the greatest place to build trails. So the environmental code of practice helps the clubs identify where they need to harden the trail, where they need to build, structures to get through swampy areas. Quadtrax last year built a 500-foot bridge across a wet area. don't have to worry about it anymore. It's going to outlast my life as a rider. So when we're talking about sustainable trails, we mean trails that will hold up in weather conditions that they won't hold up in now, and they're open longer, and the traffic doesn't destroy them, because it's very hard. It's like that person that lives on the dirt road. I'm sure they're not having fun tonight going back and forth to their home. So we're in the same boat. We have to fix that road. It just happens to be a trail, and we have to make it harder so it will stand the wear and tear that's going to happen to it. So now comes the fun part of the night. Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm going to tell a little story first, because I know this is probably on a lot of minds wondering why. And everybody asks about the Confederation Trail. Why can't we use it? There's a fairly big history to it, and to the best of my knowledge, I'm going to share to you why we are where we are today, not being able to use the Confederation Trail. So in 1998, the rail bed was ripped up, and there was a group called the Rails to Trails formed. And Rails to Trails, a gentleman by the name of Donald Deacon was the inspiration to it. And his goal was to turn that into hiking and biking trails, but probably at the time, just hiking trails. So he was able to convince the government, he was able to convince Trans-Canada Trails to make it part of the Trans-Canada Trail in Canada. And in Summerside, if you go behind the Loyalists, there's a plaque there with the symbol of the Trans-Canada Trail. Basil Stewart, I believe, was on the first committee that was involved with that. So we were selected because the province was small, the rail bed was coming up, so they turned it into a hiking and biking trail. And over the years, Trans-Canada Trails has donated a lot of money to this. At the time when Trans-Canada Trails was formed, it was primarily non-motorized, which meant hikers and bikers, that was it. At the time of the Rails to Trails group, they were involved for quite a few years, but then Island Trails became involved with it. They kind of moved on, and they became the voice for the Confederation Trail, the Rails to Trails. And over the years, Island Trails has been able to attract financial donations to the Confederation Trail, and one of those donations was made by the Weston Group, who owns Loblaws. And I think it was 2014 or 13, I have the newspaper article at home, the Weston Group offered I think they offered $1 million, and the Trans-Canada Trails offered $400,000. So they went to all the provinces in Atlantic Canada, and there was a stipulation with this money that it could not be used for motorized trails. So the province of PEI accepted the money from the Trans-Canada Trails, the $400,000 and the $1 million from Loblaws, with the stipulation that trail will never be used for motorized. They never consulted the public. The public had no input on it whatsoever. So that agreement that they have for the $1.4 million has locked the trail down, and they've tried to designate it as a greenway space. And the greenway space pertains to the whole right-of-way of the Confederation Trail from Elmira to Tignish to Murray Harbor. And the group that claims that they're the voice for the trail, Island Trails does not invest any money, Island Trails does not manage it, Island Trails does not do any volunteer work on the trail. They only seem to be the voice for the trail. So they've convinced the government to hire crews to do all the work, to work on the Confederation Trail. And when we applied for these 13 crossings of Confederation Trail crossings, and I think Tignish has one at the back of their trail system, they fought that tooth and nail just for us to be able to cross. They badgered, they bullied, they did whatever they could do to destroy our credibility. At one point in time, they told the government that we wanted 200 crossings of the Confederation Trail. So it was a little bit of fear-mongering. So to this day, that's why the Confederation Trail is off bounds to us, because other groups have convinced them. And at the time, in 1998, there was no ATV Federation. all along the way, the Federation was never established strong enough to be able to fight it. The snowmobiles were at that time, and they have an agreement with the province to utilize the Confederation Trail. But everybody knows that that agreement's they're getting less and less of the Confederation Trail as the urban areas keep expanding. They're being pushed back. They're having a hard enough time just to get around Summerside right now. So that's kind of why the Confederation Trail is where it is. Is it right? Is it wrong? But that's where it is, and it's tough to see the trail here being utilized. Everybody knows it's being utilized. We asked for it. No, it's not available. But yet, anyway, it's just one of those things. So I just wanted to share that with you so you understand that it's a big challenge to try to get an inch, because the first inch you get is going to be the hardest inch. After that, there may be an opportunity down the road for us in pinch points like Portage and that kind of area where there's a swamp on both sides of the roads. But it's going to take a lot of work to get there. It's going to take a voice like the voice in this room. And we have to do what we say we're going to do and gain more credibility. And I think at that time we may be able to do something, but it's going to take a lot of work. So we're going to open up the floor.
And it's really not, for us, it's really not much of a topic of discussion for tonight, because there's nothing we can do about it.
No.
Whether we get this product or we don't get what we're asking, the Confederation Trail is not
On the table. Right. So these are some of the rules just to make it go easier. Raise your hand. We have a mic. We'd like everybody to grab the mic and have the discussion. We'll try to answer it. We're keeping notes of what the discussions are, so that we can go back and formulate some of the points that were brought forward here tonight. Try not to speak at a turn. Let's not have any sidebar conversations. That just distracts from what we're trying to do here, because we want to hear what you have to say. And believe me, the last 2 nights, a lot of people didn't mind telling me how they feel. So each person we're going to give you ample time to talk, and there is no stupid questions, guys. This is about giving you the opportunity to tell us how you feel, and if there's some great ideas that come from this, please, if you have some ideas how we can move this forward. Who wants to go first? Yes, sir. Just a second, we'll get your mic, okay?
You said that the government has an agreement with Loblaws or whatever that provided 1.4 million. Never be motorized vehicles on the trails. That agreement is gone. The snowmobiles are on the trail, they're motorized vehicles.
The snowmobiles were there long before they made the deal with the Weston Group. They were there, they had a voice. So they do have a contract with the government. We didn't have a voice at the time, so we couldn't be at the table. So their voice was loud enough that they're still there. And when the Loblaws offered the money to them, they accepted the money based that the Snowmobile Association already had a contract with the province and will continue to have a contract.
Okay, you didn't say that well.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, so sorry.
We should keep trying to get access.
Who's next? Don't be bashful.
Paying an annual fee registration at the end of the day isn't going to benefit a whole lot of people in this room, because we really don't have any place to drive other than driving illegally on the roads. So if the government's not going to open up dirt roads or give us something to go with, I mean, what's the point in even doing this?
So, I don't know if you missed the first part of the meeting, but Tignish's pilot roads are the next round of roads to be presented to the government. So we're working on Share the Road to get community access right now in Tignish, and we're working with the community, we're working with the club, and this club's trails are gonna go all the way to O'Leary's trails. I know this club's almost to a point of having a deal with landowners to get into Alberton. And then the O'Leary Club has trails that go from there to like Tim Hortons in O'Leary.
So you're saying we're gonna get dirt roads from here to O'Leary, on like a trail system of dirt roads from here to O'Leary, so that we can actually drive legally and we can actually use off, like paved roads on, like secondary roads to get across to these dirt roads, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, yes. I'm gonna do everything, and our group's gonna do everything to acquire pilot roads. The club's already identified which ones they are, and I can't remember all the roads, but it starts back here at the Mill Road and goes all the way to Prophet's Corner. And then they have a way to get to the Warren Road, all the way to O'Leary, and then over with private landowners to get to Alberton. So the goal is to have, and West Prince has the potential to have the easiest time to link all the clubs together, because this is the most defined section, but we are working to get community access, and we're working to get these pilot roads, and that's the next part of the picture here.
So is that gonna come along with the registration, or is that gonna happen after the registration plan?
It's actually gonna start long before the registration deal's done. So it's already started. We have a lot of the maps already done, and I've actually told Larry tonight that it's your turn to have your pilot roads presented to the government. And these roads are not gonna be hard to get approved. A lot of them don't have very many homes on them, that kind of thing. So the pilot roads will be approved before annual registration becomes in effect.
And so the registrations also allow us to go down the paved roads to make the connections across these dirt roads?
If they're identified in the Share the Road community project, yes. What roads become part of it depends on what the club asks for, what routes there is to get into the community. So it's gonna be a designated route to get in and out, and at this point, that's what it'll be. So it won't be all the roads, it'll be identified roads that we can negotiate with the government. The government has to change the regulations to make this happen. There's no regulation that allows this to happen right now. So for it to happen, the community roads, we have to get the government to change the legislation. And we've been able to get 2 pieces of legislation through the legislature in the last 3.5 years to change the Off-Highway Vehicle Act and the Trail Act in order for these initiatives to happen. So we have a pretty good track record. We're the only group that's ever been able to change the Trail Act or the Off-Highway Vehicle Act.
So we'll be able to get right to O'Leary from Tignish on a road system.
In the winter time right now, I think it's late. I'm not sure about the summertime, but that's the objective, is to link all these clubs together, yes.
No, I'm talking like summertime roads, like so that you can actually legally go for a drive in the summertime.
That's the objective.
By the law.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. Anybody else want to ask a question?
So in the 20% that the government gets, is any of that going to cover like policing of this? Like is this going to be enforced but not policed? Or?
That's our hope, is that we're going to be able. We've already talked to them about it. That we need enforcement to do their job with discretion,
Okay.
common sense. Yes.
All right. And dividing up the money, like your proceeds from these registrations. I know you guys are talking like goes by kilometers or amount of club passes sold. What about like clubs that are year-round clubs that have a trail system 365 days a year, maybe closed somewhat during wet season, but that not only run 2 months of the year, 4 months of the year? Should they not get a little bit larger cut of it? Or?
So we use this formula, and I think we can talk about it, but this formula works really well in New Brunswick because they have groomed trails and they have non-groomed trails. They have trails that are open year-round and trails that aren't open year-round, and so we use their model. Nova Scotia model is a little bit different. the hikers and bikers can actually access the fund in Nova Scotia, and we don't necessarily want that. We want to have a fund that we administrate. So we grabbed their model because it works the best. It's probably the best model in Canada, but it's a good point.
So I think what you find, and I'm not sure if New Brunswick still does this or not, but through their trail pass portion, when they're splitting up the money that they give out for their trail access passes, is that they would have a revenue leveling fund portion of it, which a club that runs 4 seasons versus 3 seasons or 2 seasons would get a higher percentage that way. So the percentage may not come, sorry, am I squealing here? The percentage may not come through the government share, but it may be something that the provincial federation could do with the way they split up the trail access money or the trail permit money. So I guess, Peter, the way that I understand this, if I summarize this, is that the Federation has gone to the province with an idea about having an annual registration fee, and they have expressed interest in that. And one of their stipulations, or their main stipulation, is that the ATVers of the province have to own that if it comes forward. All politicians only have one job. If there are any politicians in the room, I apologize for this, but a politician only has one job, and that's to get reelected. And if they do anything that's anything controversial that could be detriment to that, they're not going to. So that's why they want the sector to own it rather than have the government own it. I think that the timing is right for you to go through with this. I think that you do have enough of a product to start with. It's not perfect, but you do have enough of a product to start with, and you have something to build on that's going to make it a lot stronger. And I also think that this is a lot more than a $50 charge that you're being asked to pay on an annual basis, because as soon as you get into, let's say, bed with government, and government's got to get into bed with you, so there's as much apprehension from their side as there is for your side. You're maybe not one of the things that they would put real high on their thing of wanting to get into bed with, so they're going to be a little cautious on their side as well. And if they're willing to do this, what that does is that builds your relationship. So fast forward 15 years from now, and 10 years from now, whatever it may be, the ATV Federation is the strongest by far trail federation in the province. And then you've got these weak little island trails group that really is just kind of a gnat on the wall of government. Then could things really be changed as to who accesses and what happens to the Confederation Trail? And maybe by that time you guys have enough money, you just give them back their $1 million and say, now we want the trail.
It is a different part of PEI, and I think the trails that are here need to reflect what the community would like to see happen with the trails. You know, I think at the end of the day, somebody in Charlottetown has decided what's the best for Western PEI, and I see that too often. And I think at some point in time, someone has to say, what do the communities of West Prince want to do with trails? What trails do they want? How do they want them managed? How do they want them utilized? What's the purpose of those trails? And I think our group will have a voice in the future to say, this is what we'd like to see, and it would be taken serious. So I do want to acknowledge and thank Hal Perry. If nobody knows the gentleman, he's from Tignish, I believe, and travels to Charlottetown quite a bit. Hal's always been very supportive and helpful to us as a federation and willing to do things. So I think you have a great MLA here to help with the cause of trying to get community access and to do other things in the community. So is there anything you want to say, Hal? I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
If the opportunity here is to speak, speak, I'll speak. So you don't have to sell me on anything. I bought into this a long time ago, as you know. We've had a lot of communication with the Federation and with our local sportsman association over the years. So I do what I can to advocate on your behalf, on their behalf, because I do see the potential economic growth that this can deliver right across Prince Edward Island. And in particular, I have to look after the communities in my district, so I see that. And in the past, I've done what I could to support our local club through wage subsidies, so they could have people hired to do the maintenance or cut up new trails, to talk to landowners to get them to sign on. So that's something that I have done and will continue to do. The proposed pilot project is something that, again, I bought into. I really want to see. I know it can happen. I applaud those in New Brunswick to make it happen. The municipality of Tignish, town of Tignish, has also bought into it. So we have that support, but what we need is the support of everyone in this room and everyone who's involved in this organization right across Prince Edward Island to have that voice. We talked about communication earlier, and it's very important. The louder you are, the more they listen. The squeaky wheel gets greased. It's so true in government. So in order to change that legislation, you mentioned two pieces that were amended in recent years, but in order to change more legislation, there needs to be buy-in from other legislators across the province. So I know of only two in the past that have ever been vocal publicly about even using portions of the Confederation Trail, and that's one of them is myself, and one was the former MLA in Summerside, Chris Palmer. We truly believe that the Confederation Trail is not used to what it should be, and there is a part that the ATV federations and clubs can use to access not only other communities of Prince Edward Island than Tignish, but just to have that trail system from end to end. With that said, I mean, I don't know if anybody has any questions for me in particular, other than I could put a private member's bill forward to amend that act. However, the difficulty in that is you have to have buy-in from government. So I'm only one of 27. If the other 26 don't buy into it, then I'm just, it's I don't want to say it's a waste, but it has to be done right. So in speaking with the Minister of Transportation, I think right now the pushback is the bureaucrats from within the system that are either giving them some kind of advice to be cautious on this. But I did speak to the minister today about this. He said they're still considering pilot projects. I wanted to know an update on it. And he just mentioned that there was, I think, 42 kilometers, and you mentioned earlier, of unpaved roads that would be brought into the system, and most of that will be in Prince Catholic.
So if I could ask a quick question on that, is if you introduce a private member's bill and it happens to be voted down at this point, how long is it before another kick at the can, as per se, could be done? When could another private member's bill? So if you did it, say in 2023, and it was voted down, could you do it again in 2024? Or do you have to wait for a period of time? Or
no, there's no requirement for time in between. It can be brought up with the necessary changes. So if I brought a bill to the floor and it was an act to amend the Off-Roads Act, then it can also be amended on the floor
right
at that time too, to suit whoever, or it can be just voted down at the end of the day. So it cannot be carried through to, I guess, through to the whole House. So there needs to be a majority of legislators to buy into this act. And again, when I spoke to the minister on this, it seems to be a little bit of cautious input to him from the bureaucrats within.
right, and that's fair. So I understand that we could be going into an election in Prince Edward Island over the next little while. So when the politicians, the MLAs, come knocking on your door, it's probably a very good question for you to ask them, is where they stand on opening up for other uses on the Confederation Trail. And if nothing else, it gives a lot of current MLAs, or a lot of people positioning to be an MLA, that, gee, this is a bigger topic than what we think it is if a whole bunch of people start asking that question, which makes a private member's bill much more substantial when it goes through, because a lot of people who are sitting there say, oh, geez, when I was knocking on doors, 40 people mentioned this, I better take notice of this. Am I right in my suggestion
You're
there?
very correct on that. Yeah, there's a lot of public pressure, and public pressure can change the minds of legislators. So depending on the makeup of the legislature too, has a part to play in that. So right now, with the party that I'm with, of course, we're low in numbers. So our voice is not as loud, but we would have to work with one of the other parties on this side to get it through. So any of the private members' bills that I've proposed in the past, I've usually tried to make a deal prior to tabling it into the House so that I know I have that support going forward.
Thank you, that was very helpful information.
So part of our strategy going forward, we have an advocacy committee that meets with the province, and they're the ones that bring forward the initiatives. And we are, at the last election we had, we really tried to step up our game and ask our riders, ask our members to challenge the MLAs at the door. And we are going to, we're going to give you the tools this time to do that. We did it the last time, but we're going to try to step it up a little bit more so that you have the questions you can ask at the door when the MLA comes related to the projects and the things that we're trying to motivate to improve our sport. So we are going to be part of that. We're going to probably have a page on our website where you can go there and make comments and fill it out and send it off to your MLA of choice. We do have a really good relationship with the Liberal Party and the Progressive Conservative Party, and I think there's an opportunity for some of these things to work together with both of the parties to make them reality. So we do have a commitment from the Premier. We met with him upstairs not that long ago, maybe 6 months ago, and it was all about the community's wishes. And I hear this a lot in other groups that are trying to do things across Canada, is you almost have to be a grassroots group and say, you know, we've worked with the communities agree with this, and we want to move this forward. So if you can get the communities active, and then they can come up with a plan, and the communities are behind it, it has a lot more strength to go further. So so we encourage you when the MLAs show up at your door, to the potential MLAs, to say, you know, what are you prepared to do for our sport? And we're going to give you the questions and some of the projects that we're working on. So
There's just two other comments that I want to make about that too. Is number one is that right now we have the opportunity to work as a partner with the government. There's nothing saying that if we choose to say no to this, that the government's not going to go ahead and implement a fee on ATVs anyways, an annual license fee, and not share any of it with the sector. So you may want to consider that when you're making your decision. And I've lost my train of thought now as to what the second thing was. Peter, I'm getting old. 3 times this week I should.
was your Visa card at the bar or something? No.
I wish.
Anybody else, while Wayne's rebooting his mind, does anybody have any other comments or questions or ideas? Or
I'd like to know if you've ever thought of putting pressure on the government by pulling all your ATV federations together and going to the legislature with everybody with their ATVs in the back of their trucks and make some noise and make a political statement to the government in regards to putting a little pressure on them, maybe.
And the answer is yes. We've thought of it, we've discussed it, and we thought that the proper approach was to try to do this with factual information, move forward as a group with a plan. Sometimes you have to be careful because you can go backwards as a group. We've gained so much credibility as a group and with the clubs. We don't want to jeopardize that. So right now, when we call the transportation department or the deputy minister of transportation, they actually call us back. And some of the meetings that we've had lately, they've actually explained to us how to make things happen from a bureaucratic. So there's 2 things you have to remember. There's the MLA that gets voted in and represents your community, but there's the gentleman or the lady that works in the transportation department that is a bureaucrat, and that bureaucrat has to have a round peg fit in a round hole. And if they don't, then they're not comfortable at making a decision. There's not, like we ask for pilot roads, there's no little sheet that says, you know, this is my height, this is my weight, this is my shoe size. Then they can process it, but these are all new things that we're trying to do, and they don't have the policies within the department to make them happen. So we're relying on the deputy ministers and the ministers to take a leap of faith and trust us and do what we say we're going to do, even though it's done in New Brunswick in 28 communities. They're reluctant to do it because they don't have the policy to say, how do I get ATVs to that road? But yet, the gentleman that writes the regulations for the potted roads and for the share the road has already told us he knows how he can do it. So we've got to convince the MLAs to make it happen, that it is a legitimate request from the community, and then we have to convince the bureaucrats that they're not going to lose their job over it, or get a call at 2 in the morning to say there's 50 ATVs going down the Confederation Trail. So we're trying to do it above board, factual, no emotions, with a plan to say to them, this is what we're going to do. Try it as a pilot. When we did the pilot roads, they were petrified that something was going to happen. And the pilot roads, this will be the 3rd season, and there hasn't been one incident on 13 roads. So they just don't have the fortitude or the constitution to take chances, and that's why we have to give them a plan and let them know that we're going to do exactly what we say we're going to do, and we're going to try it. And the reason we use pilot projects so that if it goes bad, they can say, oh, we're just shutting the pilot project off. So that's why it's called the pilot project, because there's reluctance to change. And when you're trying to change something, it takes 1,000 times more energy than to make it happen in the first place. So, and there is people opposing what we do. So we have to counteract that with facts. That's why we have an environmental code of practice, so that the environmental groups can't come at us and say you're not doing things the right way. That's why we have governance model that shows that we're a board keeping minutes. You know, we have to be all above board, because if somebody has the opportunity to see through that, and we will lose credibility. So,
And you'll lose huge credibility if this federation by majority decides that you're going to pursue this after the vote is taken and the majority has ruled and said yes. And if there's any one club or group of people that oppose it publicly, that will probably set you back to the point where you'll never be where you are today in anybody's lifetime in this room. So if it ends up going forward, please, 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 as ATVers, support it. Support it at the highest level you can, and if you can't support it, then at least keep your mouth quiet about it, because opposition from the sector will be extremely damaging going forward. That was the second thing I wanted to say, by the way.
So all night I've been waiting for one guy to stand up and say how he feels about this. So is this the time when he's going to stand up and tell us how he feels about this?
It's on its way.
So in 2007, I'm going to give you a little history story. In 2007, I think it was September 20th, Jason, what's your chunk? No, Jason? Jason was one of the original members that signed the documents to create the original federation. And at that time, they had a vision, they were trying to move things forward. So I commend him as one of the people that stepped up at that time to make the federation what it is today. So you got the floor, my friend.
As far as what we're here for tonight, the change for the annual registration, I'm in favor of it 100%. I think it's a huge step ahead. And like the gentleman said here, if we don't go with it, 2 years from now, government can step in and say, we want ATVs registered every year. The fee's gonna be $50, $80, whatever it is, and we get nothing out of it. This way, yes, it's going up $50 a year, but you're getting back $28 of that 50. The two things I've been hearing most people complain about, listening to everything that's going on, is, oh, it's another $50 a year, another waste of money. Well, you've spent $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on a machine, along with the gas, the food, the accommodations, all that stuff with travel. What's another $50 a year when you're getting $28 of that back to yourself, to your club? And the other part I hear a lot is, oh, I ain't gonna pay $50 for, we got no place to drive. Well, if we got no place to drive, the person that's saying we have no place to drive is the same person that's sitting home when someone's having a trail work day that they ain't out helping with the trails. There's not a club on PEI that can say they have a trail cutting day or whatever they want to call it, and there's too many people show up. Right? Every club will agree with that.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason.
How's everybody? I have a question kind of towards Hal, kind of towards all the ATV federations. Has it ever been approached to the government to rent the trails for the year? The federation trails, I guess I'm saying.
I don't think it should be off the table, but I think you should work on getting yourselves just a little bit better established, because again, you're getting into bed with the government's getting into bed with you. Once you have a higher level of confidence from them, the opportunity to do that is much greater.
I guess I'm just curious. I spent the early bird pass. I paid $200 to drive my screw. I put 230 kilometers on yesterday, so it cost me basically $1 kilometers. I don't think I'm going to do it again. I'll gladly pay $300 a year to drive on trails. I'm sure everybody in this room would agree. There's 2,900 members. I think you said earlier that bought trail passes. I'm pretty sure those would all agree. That's $900,000, basically $1 million. If we can rent it for $1 million a year, everything over the $1 million comes back in your guys' pockets as ATV Federation shareholders or whatever, and we disperse it. So when Brunswick people come here, we pocket the money. It's an option. I mean, it was 1.4 million that blah blahs and whoever bought the trails to say nobody puts anything on it but a sneaker. Like, they're spending, the government's spending millions of dollars a year to keep these footpaths open through random trails that I don't have to do anywhere. I don't walk much. And I don't understand.
You should try them in Ontario, where you get to the end of the Trans-Canada Trail and there's Lake Superior, because the next portion of the trail is 20 kilometers of water trail.
So
I don't disagree with you.
That's just my thought. Like I said, it's pretty easy to come up with $1 million, and in my eyes, anyway. Like I said,
I think you're really onto something there, and I think you just need a year or two to get yourselves established to that point.
I ain't doing it,
But
guys.
I think that's probably the best idea that I've heard in all of the meetings. So kudos to you for bringing that forward.
well, you spoke earlier on the Snowmobile Association, 2,800 permits at $250. We'll say half and half. They buy them out. They got to spend $250,000 to keep them groomed with equipment. What does it take to look after a trail for a summer?
Yeah.
I can fix it with a rake in a couple hours or a mile. Sure. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. It's not.
You're talking about a rake being dragged behind you side by side, right?
Yeah, I have the rover. I can do that.
You walk out and rake it, or you drive out and rake
Thank you.
It's not a bad idea. I think the whole pilot project concept gives us an opportunity to do things without a big commitment from the government to a long-term plan. And I know the government's trying to widen the highway or do something from Portage to West Devon because there's only one road through there. And maybe that's the opportunity that we work together and create a shared trail. And then that would give us more credibility for the asks down the road. But it takes a lot to persuade the bureaucrats to be able to stick their neck out enough for that to happen. But you're right, money would make a big difference if you stood there and said, we have the money to do this, and with this fund, we will have the money to do work on trails, not just,
And not a sole ATV trail. If you still want to walk it, I'm not. I have driven on it. I have met people. Send me a bill. Along with everybody else in here, I'm sure. I haven't run over a pedestrian yet. I've met them. They share a trail. It's happened elsewhere.
and that's,
Yeah.
so our ATV tourism feasibility study is asking those exact questions. And they're turning over a lot of rocks. They've spent time with Celtic Shores Trail System in Cape Breton, which is a multi-user trail. They've spent time with the people in Tatamagouche, where it's a community-based trail association, and it's multi-user trail. And they're talking with the people in Tantallon at St. Margaret's Bay Trail Association. The big thing is ATVers have money to invest in trails. The hikers and bikers do not invest a nickel. So if we can establish a fund and gain more credibility and do pilot projects to show that we're not evil people with horns growing out of our heads, I think there's a potential for us to do a lot. But it takes time and it takes relationship building. And I spent the last 8 years building relationships in the provincial government and with the MLAs, and it's starting to pay dividends, you know, and it takes time. So, and we documented your comments, which we appreciate. 3's wish to make change, then figure out how we empower the community to make the change. That's all I can say. Like, we'll do whatever we can, but it's like me going knock on a landowner in Tignish and say, can I build a trail on your property? Who the hell are you, right? So the community is the one that can change. If the community of Alberton and Tignish and O'Leary got together and talked about it, first step and said, is there interest for us to assess the Confederation Trail as a trail? Is it being utilized? What's the wish of our communities? The people in Charlottetown would have very little challenge. They'd have a hard time to challenge it because the community voice matters. So I think if the first step, if you guys want to change something, is to create a group to change it. Take your time doing it and figure out a plan. And if you had the support of the communities, it's pretty hard for somebody in Charlottetown to tell you it's not going to happen. You know, you guys have to fight for your health care and your hospitals. Kind of do the same thing. Fight for a voice. If you want to change it, you can make it happen.
Hi. Okay, so because of all the talk with the Confederation Trail, it kind of detracts from what annual registration is really about. So I think we need to kind of go back to the point of annual registration is how we're going to invest in trails. So Confederation Trail is a developed trail. It is there, it exists. We just don't have access to it at this time. So it's something that 100% the Federation can work on in the future. But right now we need to think about establishing our own trail system, and that's what annual registration is all about. Being able to put money in the club's pockets to build trails, maintain them, build them sustainably so that we can travel them all year long. And I think we need to look at the dirt roads, the pilot projects, as our Confederation Trail, because that's how we're gonna link our trails and connect to each club throughout PEI. So I think Confederation Trail is it's a hot topic. It's something that everybody wants to see and wants to have. I think it'll happen at some point with pressure from the communities, just like Peter said. But I think we need to focus on annual registration and what that money and that fund is gonna do for our clubs. And that's how we're gonna develop trails. That's how we're gonna get tip to tip way faster than if we invest all of our time and energy into the Confederation Trail.
Now do you see why she's our communications specialist? So everything you see on Facebook is Kelly's signatures on it, and she does an amazing job. We have people across Canada that follow our Facebook pages and our website. We get traction like we're kind of the envy of Canada right now for some of the stuff that we've been able to do as a federation, and it's people like Kelly that helps us raise the bar, so. You want to talk again? Stop the journal. Don't publish yet.
This isn't on the annual registration, but it's been talked a lot tonight on the pilot dirt roads. You're talking, Wellington has received some already and they're up and working, and I believe they'll work with the right enforcement and whatnot. You also said tonight that there was a bunch coming to Tignish next. I would like to know where the Larry Club stands on that. At what point are we gonna get ours?
I've already started yours, but I think we're gonna process theirs because there's less asks than what you have. And we've got to figure out the Devar Road, what we're gonna do there. We need an agreement with the forestry department, and that's kind of holding that up. So, all the requests are gonna happen this season before
Yeah,
the,
that was the second
yeah,
part.
yeah, it's gonna happen right away, so.
So we're not looking at being put on the back burner
No,
for
no.
a year or 2 years.
No,
It's
no.
looking like this year.
Yep.
If it's gonna work, it's gonna work this year.
Yeah, we've done a lot of the work already on our trails, or the roads, and identified them.
Okay, I just want to clear that up when people ask us.
Yep.
And I also think the Federation's doing a great job, so they deserve a round of applause.
Yeah, and we need you to really reach out to your clubs and tell them how you feel. I'm sure you'll do that, but the clubs are the groups that are gonna come to the Federation meeting with their representatives, and they're gonna bring forward the wishes of their permit holders, which are the people of this community. So, please talk to your friends, create some discussion, but let your club members know how you'd like this to process or proceed, and they'll bring that forward at the next meeting. So,
Ask how much support you have of it right now.
how much support do we have for this, Rick?
Unofficial.
Show of
You can ask the question, but
You can.
no, I can't.
How many people here tonight are in favor of this? Raise their hand. Okay. Unofficial vote. Just to see where we stand. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.